Tonight's webinar is about the impact of COVID on mental health and well-being. We have data from overseas. International data now shows that COVID, with the restrictions as well as the fear of actually getting COVID itself, does have an impact on students, mental health of students, mental health of teachers, mental health of parents. Unfortunately, in this day and age, mental health still carries a bit of stigma. It continues to carry stigma in our society, and just as does in Fiji, it's not just a stigma in Fiji, but overseas as well. Even here in Australia, mental health still has a lot of stigma with it, and feelings of shame, feelings of being hopelessness, being isolated, and as a result of that, people may actually feel reluctant to ask for help or even to get treated. I mean, just think of the word, St. Giles. That itself just conjures negative images. So I think it is important that we challenge the stigma associated with mental health. And I think everyone here has a role to play in creating a mentally healthy community, one that is inclusive, that rejects stigma, and for us teachers to look out and help our students. Tonight, our presenter is Miss Lia Ray. Lia is a qualified psychology and sociology teacher. Just so you know, psychology is actually a subject that is actually taught in high school in Australia, in Melbourne, in Australia generally. Psychology is a subject that is taught in years 11 and 12, and Lia has been teaching psychology for the past 15 years, and she works at one of the leading Catholic schools in Melbourne called Loyola College. And Leo has been a colleague of mine. I worked at Loyola College for 3 years, some few years ago, and she's actually a very good friend of mine. And I thank her for accepting the invitation to come and speak to you, the teachers. And and at the end, please feel free to ask any question. And you don't have to wait till the end. If there's anything during the presentation you want to ask, please feel free to ask Lia as we go along. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Lia. Lia, I will stop sharing my screen and I will ask you to share. You can share your screen, but before you do that, just a reminder, guys. We do ask you to fill in the attendance form. We will put a little link in the chat in a minute. So if you could do that, that will be good. And just before Lia starts, could I please request that if you could please have your microphones on mute so that we don't get any noise from the participants. But please feel free to unmute yourself and ask any questions as we go along. Lia, you are ready to go.
Awesome. So I should just be hopefully sharing my screen now. Are you able to see it?
Yes, we can see it, Lia.
Excellent. So hi, everyone. It is my absolute honour and privilege to be presenting to you today on the subject of COVID and its mental health impacts on schools. As Navneet said, Navneet and I are actually friends. I had the great pleasure of working with him for 3 years, and a few weeks ago he was on the phone to me and he asked me, hey, would you be interested in doing a bit of a breakdown on COVID and its mental health impacts on schools and how we've been tackling it here in Melbourne, and just really giving you guys some language around what we are all experiencing, even in our different situations. As he said, I am a teacher, but just to give you a bit of knowledge so you understand where my expertise comes from, is that I do have a bachelor in psychology. I then have an honours in sociology and a master's in social science before I went on to do a diploma of education and have been teaching VCE, psychology and sociology, as well as general science for the past 14 years. So I just want to be really clear that although I have a really good understanding and knowledge of mental health, I'm not in fact a psychologist. I didn't go down that path. I went into the education pathway instead. All right, moving on. So tonight, really, I'm going to cover two general areas. And the first one is what I'm just calling mental health 101. And it's basically going to be just a really brief introduction to trauma and stress. Nothing that I'm going to say will be groundbreaking in terms of you haven't heard of it before, but you might not have heard the language, the specific terminology. So hopefully I'm going to give you a deeper understanding into what psychological theory says about what we are all experiencing in different ways at the moment across the world. I then want to talk about what we do in our own schools and homes to tackle the effects of COVID in our community and what we can do to help each other through what is a very difficult time. So, starting with some of the psychological basis of the impacts of COVID. First of all, I do want to acknowledge that we all have our own individual experience of how COVID has affected us, and how it has affected me in Melbourne, Australia is going to be different to how it's affected someone else in Australia, and different to how it's affected someone in Fiji. But it really comes down to two core things, and that is this notion of trauma and the notion of stress. So what do we define trauma as? Trauma is an emotional response to a terrible event like an accident, a natural disaster, or other major events in one's life. Trauma is a part of normal life. It is something that we are all going to experience, whether it's a death of a loved one, a car accident, or at the moment, the case of a global pandemic. This is going to be a moment that for all of us, no matter our situations, will be a point where we mark and go, that is something we went through. And some people are going to be more affected by that trauma than others. For some people, the trauma of experiencing COVID is going to be more limited because perhaps they haven't had people they know or care about affected. For other people who have lost friends, family members who have been sick themselves, that is going to be a very different traumatic experience. For those in our communities who have lost employment, money, access to different things, a disconnection from family, from friends. All of these things add together to increase the trauma. And for some people, they are able to work through it and they are not deeply affected by it. But for others, the last year and a half, 2 years, has been incredibly traumatic and what we consider a period of trauma in their lives. On top of that, we actually have this notion of stress. And what's really interesting, and excuse me if I go into my psychology teacher mode here, because I actually teach this in Year 12 Psych. But stress is actually an interesting concept because people who go, oh, stress doesn't exist, it's not a real thing. Of course, stress exists. And the funny thing is, sometimes stress is positive. We want to do well on a test. We need stress for wanting to do well on a test. You want to achieve on a sporting field. We need that want test of stress to get us to peak performance, to doing well. So in our everyday lives all the time, we experience both positive stress and negative stress. The problem at the moment is that the stress that most of us going through is this negative stress. So what do we define stress as within this context? Stress can be defined as any type of change that causes physical, emotional, or psychological strain. Stress is our body's biological response. It's not something we can necessarily control. I can't control how my heart rate reacts to something. So stress is your body's response to anything that requires attention or action, and stress is part of our everyday lives. But in circumstances at the moment, what we're finding is that everyone is under more stress than they would normally be. And hopefully you're all sitting at home nodding away to that, agreeing with me that the situations you've been in has caused you to experience more stress than you would otherwise. When we talk about trauma, trauma can be what we call acute and it can be ongoing. When trauma is acute, it means it's over something quick and we can also get over it more quickly. So, for example, you've had a car accident, you're feeling, your body might be shaking, you're feeling stressed, you're feeling overwhelmed, but no one's been hurt, and the next day you feel pretty fine. It's still a traumatic experience, but it's an acute, short experience. The kind of trauma we are all going through at the moment is what we call ongoing, which means that there's not that release from it. So for the past year and a half, we've all had to deal with the trauma that is the global pandemic of COVID-19. What we know about our body's response to trauma, and again, I'm really trying to put this in physical terms for you, because I do want you to understand that even though this is psychological, it is also physiological in terms of how our body operates. What we know is that it takes 6 to 8 weeks for major changes in our lives for us to be able to cope and adapt to those major changes in terms of they affect our sleeping, our eating, our thoughts, definitely our energy levels, our engagement in life, and normally an attraction to negative thoughts, sadness, and anger. So if you're living in a constant state of change where things are okay for a few weeks and then they're bad for a few weeks and then you get something a bit back and they're okay again and then it's bad again, what's actually happening is that we're going back and forth in our patterns, and both mentally and physically we're not able to adapt because it takes our bodies 6 to 8 weeks and our psychology 6 to 8 weeks to be able to adapt. What we also know at the moment is that people are suffering from what we call accumulative trauma or multiple traumas. So what I mean here is things like financial instability, work instability, deaths in the family, sickness, just constant unsure of what's going on. So the traumas build upon one another. And what we know is that we are having very different life experiences in this extended trauma than we would normally. So what actual impacts, sorry about that guys, I forgot to silence my phone. So what actual impacts does this have on us? I'm going to talk psychologically, I'm going to talk cognitively, and I'm going to talk physically. So we know that when people are suffering from trauma, you have problems with cognition. So that's the ability to think clearly, to be able to maintain clear thoughts, to be able to think logically. We know that people will also have what we call inappropriate emotional reactions. And that can be in a number of ways. That can be actually not expressing emotion when emotion should be there, because you've had to put up with one thing after another, one thing after another, one thing after another, and you just can't be bothered anymore. Or it can be being overly emotional. We know that within COVID, we are definitely having difficulty maintaining social connections. I know that I am so desperate to see my friends. You know, I just want to see people I care about, and I can't. We know that there is rises in both depression and anxiety, and especially for those who are more engaged in the situation, who will find that there's often more depression and more anxiety there. There's an inability to learn and focus. And this has a huge impact, not just on ourselves, on our staff teams, but on our students. They are physically, cognitively not able to focus in the way they normally can. And the continuation or the accumulation of this stress does lead people to be more vulnerable to mental health issues. So I know here in Australia, we're seeing a real increase in depression, anxiety, eating disorders, all sorts of things. Physical impacts from prolonged stress, and you're probably going to be experiencing some of these yourselves. Irritability, so that I'm just getting angrier quicker than I normally would. Headaches, insomnia, or the inability to sleep. The triggering of the fight-flight response, which is how our bodies actually physically react to stressful situations, from a loud noise to what we're going through at the moment. We get an increase in stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol, blood pressure rises, our muscles tighten, and we have a lower immune system. So this means that if we're not taking the time to actually look after ourselves, that we are actually more prone to sickness in times of prolonged stress. Another term that has been going around in the last probably 6 months is this term pandemic fatigue. And fatigue, as we know, means basically tiredness, which is we're over it. And I think pretty much everyone around the world is, yep, I'm over this. But it's where we are. But this whole notion of pandemic fatigue actually is a real thing. And it's a real feeling of exhaustion stemming from the effects of COVID-19, including the different waves of it, different lockdowns, and just the emotional exhaustion that comes from not leading normally, not living normally. And it's an accumulation of these ongoing negative or challenging life events that leave us feeling emotionally drained. Now, common signs psychologically that you're going to see in people who are experiencing pandemic fatigue, and I'm going to put my hand up here and say, several of these apply to me. Several of these apply to everyone, because this is something we are all experiencing. Even if you haven't been able to put your name on it and go, oh, that's why I've been feeling like this. It's because it's this pandemic fatigue. So we are seeing higher levels of anxiety, higher levels of depression, people feeling hopeless and helpless, that they can't do anything to change the situation, that they don't have any power, or that they feel trapped. Definitely people are more irritable, maybe reacting in ways that they wouldn't have previously. Definitely lack of motivation, people being more nervous, and people being more emotional, more tearful. Common physical signs of pandemic fatigue is actually just fatigue itself. It's feeling tighter. It's getting to the end of the school day and going, oh, I really just don't have the energy. I just need a nap, or I can't work on this at the moment. I just need to stop. Headaches, loss of appetite, and sore muscles, sore neck tension from especially not being able to get around as much as we would in a normal school day. Sorry, just moving on my slides up. Common performance signs of pandemic fatigue. So what we mean when we talk about performance here is both for staff and students. So we mean in what they can normally achieve that they are perhaps not achieving at the moment. So we find that there's been failure for people to meet deadlines, lower workplace commitment, more absences, and actually performing work tasks or your duties more slowly than normal. What I was hoping to do here, and if maybe if people are interested, is I actually just want to open it up for a few minutes for some questions. Basically so the first two questions in first. So what have you seen in your students that is perhaps showing signs of trauma, stress and fatigue? And what have we seen in our co-workers that is showing these signs of trauma, stress and fatigue? So I'll just throw it open for a minute if anyone has any questions.
Please feel free to unmute your mic and just say something.
Yeah, or if you've got anything that you'd say, oh yes, this is what I'm seeing here. If you want to type it into the chat box, I've got the chat box open.
Teresi has written down pandemic fatigue patient here.
I can.
Sorry, Lia, go on.
I was going to say I can definitely see that.
Teresi, did you want to unmute your mic and say what's your experience been like? How has this pandemic been affecting you?
I am Pula.
Hola.
Doing both. Just at the moment, feeling pressured and stressed with all the worksheets and making of videos for class, because currently our situation is we cannot teach face to face and online with our students as internet connection is bad. So that is just piling up stress, because we have to continue with the curriculum and we have to complete it by a certain time. Eh?
Yeah.
So at the moment right now, all the I'm ticking all the check box, all the boxes there in under pandemic fatigue. That's just my view. Thank you.
Good. Thanks.
So you can see this stress is not, it's not, you know, it's also affecting teachers
As well. The other thing, Leah, while you're presenting, I was just thinking back. In Fiji, teachers are supposed to just prepare worksheets and give worksheets to the students to complete. And I think my understanding is students complete the worksheets and give it back. At some point, you can understand how much can the students actually take just learning through worksheets. And one of the things we have been trying to encourage here on this platform is to make teaching fun. We've been talking about last few weeks ago, we've been talking about how to use Kahoot, make it more fun, use Google Drive or Google Forms and all those sorts of things. So one of the comments I saw somewhere was, someone made a note, we are writing all these worksheets and, students are not doing enough in terms of submitting their work back. So it goes back to what you were just saying before. It's actually one of the signs. So it's not just students' fault that they don't want to do it, is what Leah was trying to say before. It's come to a point now, we now a year and a half, nearly 2 years in this situation where students are just learning through worksheets. So it's not the fact that they don't want to do it. I think there's more to it, isn't it, Leah? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one, there is that boredom element, that, oh, I just can't do this anymore, like I'm over this. But it's also a lack of motivation in general. And even here in Melbourne, where I've got access to more resources and my students have access to different things, and I try to gamify and I try to do things to keep it interesting, sometimes students will just say, no, I can't do it. I don't have the energy, so, we're definitely towards the later in the talk, I'll give some specific answers of how I've been seeing this in my students and what I've been trying to do to combat it a little. If I don't have any more questions, though, I'll keep
Anyone else? Do you wanna?
Oh, hang on.
Hi, Lisa. Sorry, it's just too much interference.
Okay.
Now, I just wanted to add to what you were saying in terms of students' lack of willingness now. When we first went to remote teaching at the beginning of the year, when we had our first lockdown this year, we could see the students' enthusiasm. And like you said, now term 3 students, half of them don't turn up to the classes now. We can see very little work submission. We can see that they're just exhausted, can't be bothered anymore attitude now. And I think even in terms of parents as well, that pressure they were giving students at the start to complete work and be on time for their class and so forth, that's not there anymore. I have students staying up till 1 o'clock, Leah, and just playing on the devices, and parents are not able to do anything.
Yeah.
So I think even on the parents' side as well, it's sort of like that giving up attitude now. What else can be done?
And also
in terms of, last year when we first went into our big lockdown, at my school, we had started this online platform, Schoolbox. You might be aware of that. We had to learn that in 2 weeks. As soon as we went into lockdown, we had to learn everything from A to Z in 2 weeks. And there was so much stress. We had teachers breaking down, crying, because we were doing that from home, learning all that from home, as opposed to being in school, learning of each other. So it was a very, very stressful time.
Yeah.
So now I think in terms of teachers, we have sort of got the hang of it. We know what to do. But I think students are now slowing down.
Yeah.
Even my own kids, my own children, I can see are slowing down now in terms of, their motivation. I think it's just been way too long. Thank you.
There's a hand up,
is that
Gita.
Hello, good evening to you all. I hope you can hear me. Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
I'll go to the first question. It says, what have you seen in your students? For me, when we started off with online classes, we started off with only worksheets. But when it started becoming the real online teaching with Google Meet and Zoom, you could find that the students were really connected and they wanted to be in school. So that stress is there. So when we started that online class, this week 6 of our class, we can see a lot of communication between the teachers and the students through messenger groups. They are asking questions, so you can feel it that they don't want to stay at home, they want to be in school. And we've been talking to parents. The parents are also saying just open the school for 1 or 2 days so that they can at least meet their friends and go back. And the only thing I find very sad is for the year 13 students who are about to go into tertiary institutions. They are the most affected at the moment because without exams, they don't know which scholarships to apply. So it's a real stress. We are trying to help, but sometimes we know that we can do only that much. Like we can't go beyond, but we are trying our best. And secondly, with our co-workers, like the teachers, when we started off, I think everyone was very in stress because we were all learning the technology. We were learning how the method will be, the strategy will be to reach out to the kids. And thanks to my teachers, Fiji and FNU and Google generally, where we found Google Meet, we found Zoom to take our classes. And further to that, we have learned Kahoot and Google Forms. Kahoot and Google Forms are directly giving us, the evaluations response very fast. So I think that has really helped us. And only sad thing we see is every day we see Facebook, social media, too many deaths are occurring. Just today, I just before starting this webinar, I saw a death of a teacher, and it makes us sad. But then we go back to the fact that this is a new normal, so we have to continue. So meditation is helping a lot at the moment. Yes, sleeping is a problem, as you have said. We have that problem. We wake up late nights because we can't sleep. We have to think about a lot of things, and we don't know, like you said, we are tired of COVID. We always say we are tired of this. When will it end?
Yeah. And from the other side, from Melbourne, I can tell you, Geeta, that everything you've said there rings 100% true for my classes, and, it's as different as our situations may be, a lot of the experience is the same. All right, I might continue going on with some content if we think you're good, if you think that's what I should do, Navneet. Yep. All right. So the final question I had on here said, why is it hard for people to maybe acknowledge that they're having mental health struggles at the moment? And a lot of this comes down to is what Navneet said in our introduction tonight, is this notion of stigma. And as Navneet says, stigma is not just an issue in Fiji. Stigma is an issue here in Australia. So many people aren't asking for help at the moment because of the stigma associated with mental health issues. And stigma doesn't only affect individuals, but also those who are our loved ones or those who support people who are going through different things. What we do know, though, is that knowledge helps overcome the stigma around mental health. So I'm so happy that I can now see there's like 60 people here tonight who want to learn a little bit more about this, because the more that we all know and that we all acknowledge what we're going through, the more that reduces stigma around what any one person goes through and makes it more likely that that person will ask for help when they need it. There are two main kinds of stigma, and that is public stigma, which involves the negative or discriminatory attitudes that people could have about mental illness. But there's also that self-stigma that refers to negative attitudes, including shame, that people who might be having a mental illness or having a mental issue at the moment can struggle to admit. Because what we talk about in mental health is that it's a continuum from functioning at a normal, mentally healthy way down to, you know, having a diagnosed issue that's untreated with significant health impacts. But we are all somewhere along that continuum. And sometimes we're going to be in a period of our life where things are harder, where things are more challenging. And we might develop our own mental health issues. And other times where we are not going to have those issues. But by talking about it, by encouraging people, as you know, people mentioning in the chat or in the conversations we've just had, actually acknowledging when things are hard helps reduce this stigma and allows people permission to get help. So now that we've got that sort of basic language knowledge around what it is that we've all been experiencing, what it is that we're feeling, what I want to talk about now is what can we actually do to try and tackle some of these impacts on our students, on our co-workers, and in our families and in ourselves. The actual psychologist at my school used this quote, and I think it's perfect for explaining the pandemic, which is, we are all in the same storm, but we have different boats. That is true for me, for people in Fiji, for where my relatives were in Italy, to people wherever. Because of different finances, different all sorts of things, we experience many things differently, even though we are all going through the same experience. Now, did someone have their hand up there for a second?
Rosika? Rosika Rattan.
So it might have been an accidental hand up. That's all right. I just thought I'd double check. If you do have any time you want to stop to ask something in particular, feel free to put your hand up like that because I can see it coming up on my screen. So this quote, we are all in the same storm, but we have different boats. It means that no one experiences COVID in the same way. And that is true for not just our students, but also their families. I know that financially, many of the families in Fiji have been hit particularly hard by a lack of tourism, and that a lot of your families of the students you teach are probably finding themselves in a lot of financial hardship. That is going to be that is a different experience from me sitting here in my house in Melbourne. So it's the acknowledgement that we are having different experiences of the same event, and that we need to acknowledge that in the working we do with people. But we also need to acknowledge that you need to care for yourself. One of the last things we often do as teachers, because we wouldn't teach if we didn't want to help people, if we didn't want to, I think everyone who goes into teaching, especially those of you who are here wanting to learn more, you have a heart for your community, you have a heart for those you serve, and you want to do the very best. And sometimes that leads us to push ourselves more and more and more because we just want to give and we want to give. But there is a limit to what we are able to give. So you need to give yourself permission in this pandemic to actually care for yourself and to care for your family and friends. So how do we respond? I've sort of spent, the first half an hour, 40 minutes talking about, well, this is trauma, this is stress. Isn't it all horrible? And it is. It's horrible. But what do we do? How do we make it bearable? And the first thing is to admit that this is not normal. What you are going through, what I am going through, what the world is going through is not normal. We have not been trained for this. We were not, our school systems, our students, our families, our friends, our governments, our world was not made for this. This is not normal. So the first thing we've got to do is acknowledge that. And acknowledge that that sucks. Because we, more than anything, all of us just want to be back to normal. So the first thing we do is acknowledge that it's not. The second thing is you encourage engagement with those around you, with your friends, with your families, in any way you can. I'm not sure what kind of restrictions you're under in Fiji, but in Melbourne at the moment, we're under quite strict lockdown procedures. And I know for a fact that, like, I haven't seen family members for 8 weeks or friends for even longer. And that's hard. But I call them, I Zoom with them, I make things for them, I do different things that allow me to stay connected with them. You also need to listen to what your students might actually have to say to you. And you need to affirm those around you and let them know that it's okay to not feel normal at the moment. Not just that the situation's not normal, but it's okay to actually not feel normal in relation to it. And it often comes down to what we say, the 3 C's, which means we need to care, we need to collaborate, and we need to connect. So I was wondering, does anyone have any examples of how in your own schools, in your own communities, you are actually connecting with those around you? So I've heard, well, we're using Zoom, or also we're using Google Forms, we're using Cahoots and all that sort of stuff. But what other things are people actually doing just to connect and care for those around them, be that their workmates, their friends and family, or your schools? Does anyone have anything they would like to share? I'll give it like 30 seconds. If not, I'll continue on. You can either type it or just say hi.
Anyone brave enough to say something?
You might be.
I'm just going by the names on the chat. Kriti, do you want to say something? I'm just doing what the teachers do in the classroom. No one puts their hand up, then you start calling out the names. So it always
I've
works.
gotten very used to talking to a blank screen of students not answering me over the last year and a half.
Kriti, did you want to say something? David? How are you, David?
That's all right. Just have a think about it, guys, because while I'm talking about this stuff, I'm sure there's things you're already doing. The part of the point of tonight is to stop and acknowledge what it is you're actually already doing. And if you're not doing that now, you can do that at the end or after we've done. That's fine. So,
Sorry,
what
Leah, I
is-
think Leah, there's a hand up.
oh,
Jyoti?
excellent.
Hi.
Hello.
Sorry, this is referring to your slide 16. You had a question there, right? What challenges have you already overcome in your school and how did you do this? Okay, semester 1 this year, my challenge was answering my learners' queries. So I was overdoing it in semester 1. Answering of emails, going into Moodle and also going into Viber and Messenger until 11 p.m. in the night, 5 days a week. So at the end of semester 1, I told myself, like, I will create a plan, right? So only do a consultation during working hours and put my foot down and actually tell my learners, like, you know, if you have to ask a question, go through the forum discussion and not through the messenger on my personal pages or whatsoever. And the other thing that I actually did to overcome my challenge from semester 1 experience was I actually disciplined myself and abided by my my timetable. So far this is week 8 and I'm not feeling stressed with working overnight or overtime, just answering all queries for my learners.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Wonderful example there of self-care. And when I get down to the end and I tell you some of the things I did, I'm going to say almost exactly the same thing. So an excellent thing that you've done there. Does anyone else have anything else they'd like to share? Prakashni?
Hi, Leah. As you know, I teach the little kids, primary students. So what I have been doing lately, just to cheer them up, and, you know, as you said, as I mentioned earlier, I can see the fatigue, you know, kicking in. I've been doing little things with my class. For example, you know, a dress up day. They can dress up one day, or, you know, come in we had a pajama day. And just the other day, today's Thursday, Wednesday was the last day. So we had a breakfast together. Everyone made their breakfast and we sat in our class, well, on Zoom, obviously. And we did some learning. Well, it was more fun than learning as we had our breakfast, and kids were happy to share. Some even went to great lengths of making their own breakfast that morning. So and they were just so excited. You know, just little things just to cheer them up. And I had some good feedback from parents as well, messaging me. You know, they were just so overjoyed, and you could see the happiness and the excitement in their face. And even those who are not turning up for the classes came, you know, for the breakfast. And things like, you know, crazy hair day or picnic outside. Unfortunately, it's too cold for us here. But I thought in term 4, if you are still doing, you could do picnic outside, or, you know, just take our laptops and sit outside and do a lesson outside. So I think these little things, especially with the little kids, I know with high school students, it might not be possible. But yeah, with the little kids, it's just something that they really enjoy, and just something to break the monotony of, you know, sitting on their chairs, sitting in front of their laptops in their bedrooms or wherever, and, you know, just listening to the teacher. So I thought I'll just share this little tip that I had. And also I think just with us and, you know, connecting with the family, there's been a lot of at the moment it has slowed down, but I think initially there was a lot of Zoom tea parties. And nowadays anything that happens, just the other day I had my sister had a little family function, and it was just a quick Zoom thing. At least I could see my mom, I could see them doing something. So I think just anything that you could do to connect on Zoom is just really lifts up your energy, and gives you that feel good feeling. Thank you.
Does anyone else have?
There was another hand up, Loata.
Yeah.
There you go, Loata. Go for it, Loata.
Thank you, sir. Even in my school, because they have only one phone for those parents who are working, so we usually have our online, some of the teachers, they have online classes in the evening. So when the parents are at home.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So for the worksheets, those who can access it online, we usually upload worksheets through our Viber groups for each level. And at the end of the week, we usually provide solutions for the parents to mark at home, and they usually upload that on Viber, rather than coming to school or returning those worksheets. And also for those who cannot access it online through Viber, the parents, they usually come on Mondays to collect the worksheets with the solutions the last week. And they usually return those, they mark it at home, and then they return it to school for teachers to go through the work that has been completed by the parents.
Yeah.
And the main issue that has been affecting our parents, that is for them to meet their needs at home. Since those who are working on private companies, their working hours has been reduced. So that is the main challenge, and that is the impact of COVID. And for parents, those who have missed out, those who are on isolation, so whenever they are free from, they have finished with their isolation period at home for 14 days. So they usually come to school and we help them. Now we are in week 11 of providing worksheets for primary schools. So whatever weeks they had been missing, so we always advise them, feel free to come to school and collect those worksheets, because we are there for them. So they don't, the students, they are not left behind.
Yeah.
So they are always welcome to come to school and collect whatever worksheets they have been missing along. So that is from our school, madam.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So this is the thing about being teachers. We've had to be wonderfully creative to try and do our jobs in ways that we were never taught or never prepared to do our jobs.
That's true.
So what can we do to help our communities? And I'm calling this psychological first aid. So it's just some really basics. So the first thing is that we can encourage resilience, and I'll go into what we mean by that term resilience in a minute. Adequate sleep, diet, physical exercise, and social support. So what is resilience? Resilience is our ability to bounce back and restore what we call positive functioning after a setback. And in this case, it's our ability to bounce back from small things within COVID, as well as the larger setback that is COVID. What do we know about resilience? Students, and I talk about students here because a lot of the research has been done on students, but it's just as equally true for ourselves as adults, is that people who have high levels of resilience usually have the ability to achieve positive results in adverse situations. They have the ability to function competently in students of acute and chronic stress. And by chronic stress, we mean ongoing. And they also have a much better ability to recover from trauma. So how do we encourage resilience? High self-esteem and self-efficacy. So self-efficacy is the ability to, it's not just to stand up for yourself, it's to be able to put yourself forward, to be able to advocate for what your needs are, to ask for help when you need help. This is high self-efficacy. So actually encouraging people that if they're talking down about themselves, to talk them back up. If they're saying, oh, I don't deserve this, yes, you do. Try to engage in a positive outlook. So, okay, yep, things might be hard at the moment. I might be really struggling, but what's a good thing you did today? What's something you achieved? And also encouraging what we call coping flexibility, which is something that hopefully, and when we talk about COVID, we're talking always about the negatives of it, but hopefully our students and ourselves, we're actually going to come out with a higher range of coping flexibility. I'm already seeing this in my students, their ability to change and adapt and grow in this situation is actually going to have some benefits in their later life. We can encourage emotional control and regulation. So when someone, if you're teaching younger students and they're getting emotional for no reason, you know, helping them work through that, helping them try and understand what they're feeling. We can encourage good interpersonal relationships, so our relationships with one another, and we can seek social support. And social support comes from things like your family, your friends, your colleagues, and for groups like what we're doing right now. They also to make realistic plans and to take steps to carry them out. And also we know that people with high levels of resilience tend to have better ability at communication and problem solving. And one of the good things, as I was saying, is that we are actually, hopefully, a lot of people are going to build resilience through this experience to take into their later lives as an actual positive effect of COVID-19. We also need to get adequate sleep, as hard as it sounds. When we get adequate sleep, we not only feel more rested, we are more rested. Our blood pressure is lower. Our blood sugar is more controlled. We feel fresher. We think clearer. We get what we call clearer cognition, so the ability to actually work through problems. So if you're feeling very stressed and you're not sleeping well, you've really got to try and put sleeping well at the front, because it will actually help you think better. And keeping a well-balanced diet and keeping up some physical exercise are also some of the benefits to deal with trauma. I actually have a good friend who went through something very traumatic a few years ago, and she got diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. And she was actually encouraged to take up running, and she swears it saved her life because the actual endorphins that we get when we do things we enjoy, and for her running was something she enjoyed, actually really helped her manage her depression. So we know that physical exercise, again, it's not just psychologically, it's biologically, it has an effect on the body. And finally, we can get support from family and friends. So what do we get from our family and friends? We get love, which is essential to who we are as people. You can catch up with people to vent emotions, and that's both in person or online. I know that my school uses a program called MS Teams, and the other psychology teacher and I were having a chat literally yesterday for 45 minutes, not about our work. We just needed to talk to each other. We just needed to go and vent everything we were feeling and our frustrations. And when we got off the line, we felt better. Sometimes you need that trusted person just to vent how you're feeling, whether that be in person or online. We can, where possible, provide practical and emotional support. We can encourage senses of belonging. So, I've got a group of mates that we literally watch the same program every week on TV together as a group and send each other messages on Facebook chat about it as we're watching it. And even though I haven't seen some of these people for 6 months, it helps us feel connected. And where possible, we need to encourage opportunities to interact, that collaboration that I was talking about earlier. There is one specific strategy that I do want to mention to you that you may or may not have heard of before. And it may be something that you're actually already using without actually knowing that you're using it. And they're called cognitive behavioural strategies. And this is actually drawn from a part of psychology called cognitive behavioural therapy. So it is something that actual qualified psychologists, psychiatrists will do with patients to help them change thought patterns, in things like overcoming a phobia or changing the way they're thinking. But a lot of these strategies can actually apply to our everyday life. So we can use them to identify what we call faulty patterns of thought and behaviour. So thoughts that we're having or behaviours that we're doing that actually aren't benefiting us or aren't benefiting our students. And we do what we call cognitive restructuring, which is we take the negative or what we call the dysfunctional thought and we replace it with a more helpful one. And as I said, quite often you are already doing this in your classes. You're just not calling it this. And maybe not online classes, but, think back to when you're doing face-to-face. So, for example, replacing self-doubt with self-confidence. A student says to you they're not able to do something. You then help them break it down into smaller parts and tell them they have the ability to do the task. If we can reframe the way, and I'm using students in this example, but it doesn't necessarily mean students, it can be with our adults as well. But if we can reframe the way that you actually think about something, then you can change the outcome. And I've got an example here for you. So a student receives a mark on the assignment or on a task and they've failed, they haven't done well. If their thought is, I'm just so dumb, I'm hopeless, I'll never do well in this, what are their feelings going to be? Their feelings going to be, I'm anxious, I'm worthless, I can't do this. What's the point? Their behaviour is then that they give up or they make no mental effort to continue on. And this is what we're seeing in students who at the moment are feeling frustrated, are feeling tired, are feeling exhausted. They might be giving up. If we can change that thought, and what I get a lot from my students, and I deal almost completely with the senior students, is, I'll get students say, I can't do this. And my favourite word to say is yet. You can't do this yet. And that one word can start to change how they think, how they feel, and how they behave for me in my subjects. So if the thought again on receiving a low mark is, it was difficult, and I didn't do better, I didn't do well, but I can do better next time. Doesn't mean I'm a failure. What they can then do is they can feel disappointed, but they can be more optimistic. So they can go from, I'm going to fail and I'm going to give up, to, all right, well, maybe I need to ask about how I can do better in this. We can use these strategies in relation to COVID in simple ways of, you know, the kid doesn't do the worksheet well, and then through an email or however it is you're communicating with them or with the family, you give them some encouragement. Okay, well, this wasn't great, but keep going. I know you're trying hard. Simple language like that can start to really change the way that they view themselves and that they view not doing well. So that's what we call cognitive behavioural strategies. Before I go on, just to talk about myself finally, personally, because I know I've been talking for quite a while, I just wanted to give you some access, and Navneet's going to put these up on the website for you, and you'll have access to my whole PowerPoint, so you can go back and take from it whatever you want. I don't care. I just wanted to give you access to a couple of websites that you can go to for general mental health advice, or to, you know, share things with your colleagues. So we've got a website. These are all Australian based things, but they should be accessible for you, and they're all free.
And they're free. Yeah, I was going to say that's important.
Yeah, they're all free. They don't involve any kind of sign up. You can just click on and go for it. So the first one is Headspace, and just realised my returns are not in the right spot, because that should be up one. Headspace is actually aimed at young people and tackles multiple mental health issues. So if you're talking about anxiety and depression down to children, but also very specifically within that teenage group as well, Headspace has got a lot of information. Beyond Blue is aimed at adults and addresses anxiety and depression in general. Again, a lot of worksheet, like a lot of booklets, a lot of just resources explaining, talking about how do you actually talk about this. Are You Okay, which addresses severe depression and suicide. And the last one is actually a click to a PDF that actually comes from, it's a website that actually deals with drug and alcohol stuff, but they brought out a pandemic handbook of how to talk about coping with pandemic fatigue. So that's a PDF that is a great thing for you to have access to. And as I said, all available, all free, no sign up. You can just click and go through them whenever you want. And they really will give you more information, more resources that you can share, things you can print, you can send on to other people that you think might benefit from some of the stuff we've been talking about tonight.
Yeah, please don't write this down. I will place all of these websites on our website, and I will send you a link tonight. Actually, I'll do this tonight after this presentation. I will put all of these on our website, and I'll put a little note on our Facebook group that this is now available, and I'll give you a link. So don't stress.
All right. So final thing I wanted to do tonight, because I've been talking for quite a while, is actually just talk about what have I done in my situation. Not that you'll be able to do all of these things. And, oh, sorry, Ashwin has raised their hand. Did you have a question?
Go for it, Ashwin. No, Ashwin?
No. Sorry, yeah. I wanted to share an experience.
Go for it.
Teachers are extremely challenged in all sorts of skills. And here's I'm not sure, we can have a laugh at ourselves and yet, and be challenged by this little notion. When the pandemic started, one teacher that I know very closely, teaching early learning kids, who are already technologically challenged, because, you know, if you're in prep or class 1 in Fiji, you know, how do you get them onto Zoom? But anyway, the parent rang up the teacher while the class is running, Zoom's running, and rings the teacher up and says, "Can you get my kid back in front of Zoom?" You know, so the teacher rings up the parent rings up the teacher and asks the teacher, who is, you know, remotely so far away, is asking the teacher to control the child. I thought it was quite funny. I hope no one else has experienced that kind of request from a parent.
I've had parents ask me, can you help me discipline my child? And I'm like, no, I'm in my house and you're in yours.
All right, thank you.
All right. So basically, in Melbourne, we've been in a series of lockdowns for the last year and a half. So when you see this whole big list of things that I've done, don't sit there and go, oh my God, what an amazing teacher. Oh my God, how has she done all this? Because I've done these things over a year and a half. So some of them have been once-off, some of them are ongoing. But what have I done with my students to help them cope with COVID fatigue? The first thing is I keep reassuring them it's not always going to be like this, because, you know, I'm 41. Others of us are older, younger, but we've got more life experience than those in our classrooms. For them, 2 years of their lives, especially if you're talking about little ones, 2 years of their life is such a long time. So just keep reminding them that it's not always like this. I encourage them the best I can to keep going. You know, I've tried to be communicate very honestly with my students, and when they're struggling, I ask them to let me know. And then I'm like, okay, well, you're struggling with this. All right, well, how about we try this? Keep going. I just don't want you to give up. I try to be energetic and encouraging whenever I do what I call live lessons, which is, you know, when I'm able to use MS Teams, which is like Zoom, to communicate with them. I'm always trying to be upbeat people. I always start by waving. I'll put a big smile on my face, even if it's 8:30 in the morning and I am not a morning person. You know, just trying to bring that little bit of energy into their days. I have cut down the amount of content I expect them to do in a lesson. So whereas I previously might have done content and then given them 20 questions to do, sometimes it's just, okay, guys, just the content today and we'll do questions tomorrow. And yes, that has meant time pressure, because I'm assuming, I heard someone say year 13 earlier. Navneet, am I right? I'm assuming that year 13 is the same as year 12 here?
Yes. There's an extra year of high school in Fiji, okay, based on what New Zealand system is. Yeah.
But I teach 3 year 12 classes, which is our final year of high school. And I've had to really push. So our content, I actually had to have content and assessment done with them by tomorrow. And luckily I've managed to do that. But I can tell you, it was a real push to do. So that I did cut down what I did in each individual lesson, but I did manage to get there. Just like I've done tonight, I encourage them that they're not alone in what they're going through. I use websites such as Kahoot and Bookit to get them excited. It sounds like you guys have already had a bit of PD on Kahoot. Bookit is like Kahoot, but it's more gamified. So it's not just like quiz and answering questions, but they can play like little mini games within it. So they can steal coins from each other. So it's not just about getting questions right, and it's just gamifies it a bit more. And I tend to get really good engagement with it.
Lia, you're booked for a session to now conduct a session on Blooket next time.
If you've worked out Kahoot, you'll work out Blooket. You just literally go, it's almost exactly the same. It's I got shown it in like 15 seconds, and because I knew how to use Kahoot, it was fine. You can encourage offline activities that can be shared. So for example, and I'm actually going to give an example that's from one of my fellow teachers because she's amazing and I haven't done this, is once a week she does a cooking lesson with her homeroom, with her mentor students. And tomorrow, like for example, they're making pizzas. So she gets all the kids online at once just to make pizzas, to have a bit of fun with them. I couldn't be bothered doing that, but that's something she's done. I've done things like email me pictures of your pets, you know, or you know, just fun activities that they can do offline. I've checked in with students I think are struggling, and as I said, because my school uses this Teams thing, but you could do it with email or messenger or however it is you're contacting your students. I'll literally just send a message, something like, hey, I've noticed that you haven't done XYZ. I'm actually just checking if you're okay. So it's not about consequences. It's just, I'm actually maybe a little bit worried about you and I just want to see how you're going. I've still tried to give, just as I'm sure you have, individual feedback on work. I take an interest in their lives outside school. So I've tried to learn one new thing about every student I teach and just, you know, casually somehow mention that to them, just again to sort of increase that feeling of connection. And I've asked them to tell me when they are struggling without giving them a consequence for it. Doesn't mean they don't have to catch back up on work, they do, but my students know I'm not going to yell or rant at them because they haven't done their work, as long as they're honest with me. The only time I'll get mad is if they're not honest with me, because I can always catch them up if I know where they're at. But if I don't know where they're at, then I can't catch them up. What have I done to help staff cope with COVID fatigue? I was lucky enough, so I teach at a school that has about 140 staff, 150 staff. So it's a pretty big school. And I was already in charge of our social group at the school. So we've sort of extended some of that into online. So I do a weekly trivia quiz on Kahoot, where literally people use Teams, but again, you could use Zoom. And I just run a Kahoot just for fun for the staff for 20 minutes on a Friday afternoon. And it is just a way for everyone just to de-stress, and people are on there and they're giving each other crap and we're competitive and it's a laugh. And
can I just say that's actually a good idea, guys. If you are a teacher with some, I don't know, a head of department or I don't know, assistant principal, vice principal, here's an idea, maybe something you can actually just for fun. You can try this with your staff. Forget not the students, just your own staff members. You could have a bit of a fun time with your staff members. Have a little trivia. Just use Kahoot. There's lots of, as we saw a few weeks ago, there's lots of.
You can Google my name, Lia Ray, and you can steal all the Kahoots. I've got like 40 up there just on general trivia.
Yeah.
But it's just fun. And like our principal, vice principals, general staff, teachers, even the cleaner were all jumping on and everyone was just giving each other crap. And it's just a lovely way to end the week. It's just a little bit of pressure release. We also had cooking competitions. So we got people to cook like their favorite meal or their favorite, like one week we had Italian food, and then the next week we had Asian food, and then another week we had best cake, and people had to post up a photo on, like, and you could do it through email or whatever, and we gave out like literally a $50 voucher to the winners each week, you know, just things like that. Scavenger hunts in our neighborhood. So just an email went home to staff saying, take photos of these 10 things over the weekend and send them in, and you'll see who gets the most. I have with a couple of different friendship groups at work, either an online lunch or an online breakfast. So tomorrow I've actually got breakfast scheduled every Friday morning with five of my colleagues, and we do nothing but have breakfast with each other. And it's just, again, another chance to just connect and feel a little bit more energized. And if you're struggling, to actually say to these other teachers that I trust, hey, I might be finding this a bit hard at the moment. And having someone come back to me with, you know what, I'm finding that hard too.
Yeah, can I just add to that?
Yeah.
So every Friday, what my school does is we do this for the lower primary. So we have, Friday fun day. So last Friday, what they did was we had to send our baby photos to this person, and then she would put it up, and we had to guess who it is. So that was just so much fun.
I'm going to steal that.
Yeah, I know. It was just, we spent the whole day trying to say every hour or so she would put up a little bit at a time. So we would have to guess whose photos there. It was just amazing. And once they had this lolly jar, and we had to guess how many lollies are there. And there was a prize for it. So it's just little things like that. But the baby photo was really, really fun.
Yeah.
I thought I'll share this.
I love that. But again, these are all of these, when going back to those 3 C's, this is all care, this is collaboration, this is us looking out for each other, and also letting off a bit of steam. As teachers, as people in schools, we are built for connection with one another. And I don't know about you, but I'm really missing that connection. It's one of the reasons why I was so happy to do this for Navneet, because it allowed me to talk to him, you know, we're missing that. So anything that builds that with our staff is fantastic. Organising, if you work in a school that has multiple teachers at different year levels, working in teams or connecting with someone at another school who teaches the same year level you do, and actually sharing resources, actually not creating everything yourself. Maybe saying, if you've got another teacher, well, I'm going to create for English, can you create for maths? Or I'll do this topic, can you do that topic? So you're not actually recreating everything all the time. Being honest with our struggles. My school actually did a reduction in some of the staff meetings. Not a lot, but some schools I know in Melbourne actually just cancelled after school meetings completely. My school didn't do that. The ability in our younger year levels to reduce assessments. So not so much at my year 12 level, but at the younger level. And by reducing assessments, it takes some of the stress off students and actually off our marking load as well. And we've been given some afternoons off about once every 3 weeks. They've actually gone, okay, we're just going to give you the afternoon off. School finishes 1 o'clock, 1:30. Just go do something for your own mental health. Get off a computer screen. And we're also lucky enough that my school has a counselling service attached to it. So they've been able to refer people for help who are struggling perhaps more than others. Because again, We're all in the same storm, but we have different boats, and some people find this easier to deal with than others. And finally, what have I done for myself so I can cope with COVID fatigue? Because I'll admit I'm feeling it. Again, I recognise it's not normal. I realise that some days I'm going to feel like crap. I'm going to have some bad days, and you know what? I'm giving myself permission to have those bad days. I'm also admitting that I'm not teaching at my best. I'm trying my best, but I will be honest and say that, you know, even the amount of energy I can put into an online class is really different to being in the classroom with the kids and seeing their faces and able to respond, you know. So I'm giving myself permission to not be at my best, to still try hard, but to not expect what I would expect in a normal situations. Acknowledging having to change everything I knew about teaching overnight, and that's difficult. When we went into our first lockdown here in Melbourne last year, the head of IT at my school said they gave us in 2 days the same amount of PD training on technology they would give us in 2 years. And I'm sure you have all had to be creative and learn so much just to keep doing your job the very best you can. And that is hard and that is exhausting. And I give myself permission to realise that. Earlier, I can't remember who said it, but they said they've turned off at night time, you know, the hours they're contactable. I've decided I'm not working weekends. My weekends from about 6 o'clock on Friday through till Monday morning, unless I'm just quickly updating something on the Sunday nights. You know, sometimes you've got to do that. But the rest of the weekend is for me. I am not going to work. I'm actually going to give myself time, because as teachers, our job is never done. And if you don't give yourself time and permission to stop, there is always something more you can do. There just always is, at the best of times normally, yet alone in the environment we're in now. I've tried to keep up social and family contacts as much as possible. And I've tried to keep regular sleep habits, which for me, I'll admit I've struggled with, because I'm a night owl and happy to stay up to all hours of the night, and having to force myself to go to bed, you know, just to actually get enough sleep. I've asked for suggestions and help when needed. I've recognised my own limitations and knowing that I need to reach out sometimes. And I've tried to think of something positive of every day, just trying to keep what we call a positive mindset, that as crappy as a day might have been, what is something good I've done? So like today, something good I've done is talk to you guys. And finally, I've done activities that I find enjoyable. So for me, I've gotten out my saxophone and I've been playing my saxophone, which I hadn't for a while. And I'm also a crafty person, and to bring you a little bit of joy, I've been making things out of polymer clay. So these are for my niece and nephew. But this might sound stupid, but little things like this, as I'm sitting there on my computer, or I get to the end of the day, just doing something just for me, something that is enjoyable, actually helps me de-stress and gives me energy for the rest of the time. So that's what I've done. But I in no way want to imply that I am the be-all, end-all expert in this situation, because I'm not. I'm just a fellow teacher like you guys, and I am muddling my way through this as best I can. And the truth is, You are the experts of your situation. All I've done tonight is maybe give you language or give you examples, so you've got words to actually put on what you're feeling and expressing. But you are experts. You are already doing so much to keep your schools going, to keep your classes going. Whether or not you think you are doing your best, you are doing the best you can. And you are the experts of working with what you have.
Let's say, Lia is actually a member of My Teachers Fiji on our Facebook group. So I'm sure she won't mind if you want to put messages on the Facebook group on our My Teachers Fiji. Thanks, Lia, for joining that as well.
Yep. All right. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for the privilege of talking to you guys tonight. And I just want to just encourage you to keep doing what you're doing with everything that goes wrong, with the things that you're doing are great and the things that are complete failures, to just keep going, because you are doing the best you can and being an absolute positive influence in these young people's lives and in their family lives at what will be one of the hardest times in their life. So just thank you and keep doing what you do.